Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This week on the Sweetwater Minute, we are joined by Mick Guzauski. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
You're here on behalf of Manly Labs.
Yeah.
It's actually their 25th anniversary.
Really?
It is,
Wow,
yeah.
That's great.
And so you're here showing some stems through some of their gear for the meeting this morning, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, how did that go?
I went great. I've used Manly gear for a while and really like it. I own a massive passive. Got to get some of their compressors now that I've really tried them out and everything. And I've used them before. I've used the Varimu.
Right.
And just very nice, clean, warm-sounding equipment. It really helps using it on the bus on a mix done in the box.
Yeah,
Things like that.
Right. That's the problem is once you try it, then you got to have it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you get used to having that capability.
Yeah, I wish the first one was free, but
Right. It doesn't quite work that way.
No, it doesn't.
Right. So you're originally from Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
And you built your own studio there, correct?
Yeah, this was in the late 60s. I was in high school. And back then, there was really no home recording equipment to speak of. There was large format equipment for the time, which was very expensive for what you get. And my first gig when I was a kid, I worked at a hi-fi store, mainly repairing turntables and stuff, and mainly worked there so I could get decent high-end consumer gear at good price and build a little studio. I had a couple of Revox recorders. Remember those? They were
absolutely.
The consumer version of Studer. And,
Right.
The Ampex MX35 mixers. And it was in my parents' basement. Then a little later on, a friend of mine who had a studio and didn't do any more multi-track recording, he had a Scully four-track machine, 4-track half-inch. So I did a lot of work for him in exchange for using that machine, and I got that. I built a little mix-down console with 6 inputs of 4 faders for the 4 tracks, pan pots, echo send, echo return.
Right.
Then still use the Ampex mixers for the input to it, and I had some Sony mics. I borrowed a few Neumanns. I had some Shure. Just
nice
a few things. Yeah, it was a nice rig for back in '69, '70, and just went from there. And hooked up with Chuck Mangione, who was also from Rochester. And I ended up I made a living then by doing demo recording in my studio and also doing live sound for Chuck. And when he signed with A&M in '75, he took me to LA with him to engineer records, which I had a bigger demo studio in Rochester at the time. We had a 16-track back then in '75, and he was doing his first album for A&M, and he goes, "Well, do you want to engineer it? Do you think you can handle the gig?" And of course, I wasn't going to say. I was scared out of my pants.
Well, of course not, right?
And I don't think so. But went to A&M Studios, did a 45-piece orchestra live with a rhythm section, and went off pretty good. The guys at A&M at the time were very helpful and made me feel very much at home. And it was a good experience. So I just started meeting people in LA and moved out there in the late '70s and sort of built my career there.
You worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire?
Yes, around after George did. When George went, was really busy with GML and didn't want to engineer anymore, I sort of got the gig, and it was fun. It was really great guys to work with.
Nice.
Learned a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
Going back to your demo studio, you worked with some up-and-coming talent there. Lou Gramm.
Yeah.
Did some demos in your studio, 2011. So people that ended up being...
Steve Gadd was from Rochester. He was down there quite a bit. Tony Levin was at... Yeah, it was a great talent pool there because Eastman School of Music.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, it still is. It still is a lot of new people there who are really good. I haven't been around there much, but it still seems like there's a good music scene in town. There's a jazz festival now there every year that I think is under-publicized, but it's...
Nice, yeah. So you're in LA, you're working with A-list artists, Earth, Wind and Fire, Chuck Mangione. How did you make the connection with Tommy Mottola and end up in New York working at Sony?
Because I used to work, I did a lot of work for a couple producers in LA, Peter Bonetta and Rick Chudikoff, and they produced a couple things on Michael Bolton, and also they used Kenny G a lot when he was a studio musician. And so I got to know those guys, and Michael Bolton was with Sony, and so I ended up working on a couple of records of his, and Walter Afanasieff, who produced one of those records later on, also produced Mariah Carey, called me to do that because Michael wanted me to do it, and then Tommy Mottola heard it and liked what I did, and made me an offer to move to New York and work for him, which I almost didn't take because I was happy in LA. Then the earthquake in '94 hit, and I go, "Hey, Tommy, you still want me there?" And so ended up moving to New York, and it was great for as long as he was with Sony, I was fed all this work. I had my own studio. I was out in the country. It was 40 miles north of the city with my own studio, and just got work fed to me there. It was a really great situation. Then he left Sony, and I was being out in the sticks. I was a little out of the loop and stuff, and so now I'm back in LA. Back.
Okay.
I think really even these days now with all the internet communication, being able to stream mixes, download and upload things, I think this business really works on relationships and face-to-face communication.
Right.
And I was too much of a hermit for a few years, so
right.
now I'm back.
Back in the thick of things.
Yeah.
Well, you've racked up incredible credits during the course of your career. Eric Clapton, you mentioned Michael Bolton, Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
4 Latin Grammys, is that right?
Yeah. Well, three were from the same record. But
Okay. Okay. And
Alejandro Sanz, which was he's a great artist. It was a great record, I think. And
right.
It was a lot of fun. Worked on that in Miami.
And then a Grammy Award?
Yeah, for that. I got a Grammy Award for, it was Best Recording Latin, Album of the Year Latin, and Best Single Latin. So there's 3 on that. Then I got another Latin Grammy for Thalia, who was Tommy Mottola's wife now. And then a Grammy for an Eric Clapton album, Best Engineered Album in 2005.
Nice.
And then Eric Clapton and B.B. King, a Grammy for that, and Eric Clapton and J.J. Cale. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And also an Emmy Award for Eric Clapton, too, correct?
Was it Emmy or no?
For the video that...
oh, yeah. I don't know. Was it? Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I didn't get I didn't physically get the award.
Okay.
It was listed on it, but that's
right.
why the
Nice.
Grammys. I have a physical awards. And
right.
It's sort of cool.
So for many years, you've worked out of your own studio, Barking Doctor Studio.
Right.
Well, what's the appeal of working in your own studio?
The advantage of working in my own studio is it's just nice. I can work when I want to work. If I don't feel like finishing up something or doing a marathon session, I can put it off till the next day. I'm not inconveniencing anybody or causing any additional costs by that. It's just a nice, convenient way to work. There's a negative about it too, and that's that you sort of can get out of the loop working in your own place. And in this business, a lot of, as I just said, a lot of it's relationships, a lot is meeting people, and it's always been really advantageous to work in a 3-4 room facility and meet people in other sessions. And really, I mean, that's how I built my career. And it was just the momentum that sort of kept me going at home. Now I'm back to meeting people again.
Right. So do you work with a manager then who helps you find gigs, or do you do that yourself?
I'm talking to a couple. I did that for myself a while. I've had managers in the past. I've talking to a couple people now who are working as, I don't know if you would call it managers or agents. The thing is with managers, as far as engineering, they don't want to commit to getting you gigs. Most of them, they'll even if they have a contract, let's say we're not an employment agency, and I think they just sort of cop out of it, It's, so I'm talking to a couple young guys now who are really excited about the business and everything, and really want to keep me working, meet new people who are making pop records right now, and I guess they are managers, but I think it's a new breed of people in this business, and I really like it, and I'm sort of going to give that a try for a while to see.
Sure, that's great.
Instead of going with the old school kind of thing.
Right. So in your studio, are you based outside the box? Or are you working with a console and outboard gear, or are you using mostly in the box?
Well, at Barking Doctor, that was in New York, and I just moved out of New York. It was I had a Sony Oxford console, XFR3. I was using Pro Tools as a source. I had Sony 3348s. I had an analog 24 track there. When I started the studio, which is in '94. The home recording revolution was just sort of starting. So so as a mixer, I'd get things in every format, and even a bunch of formats simultaneously. I'd get some songs where the basic tracks were recorded in the studio, 24 analog. Someone did some overdubs in their home studio on a Tascam D88. Someone else did overdubs on an ADAT. So I'd get all these things and have to put them together, sync them up, and bounce them to the Sony 3348 and mix from that. And I had an early version of Pro Tools. I think it was Pro Tools 3 with 8 in and 8 out. And what I used to use that for is when all these formats had sync. Some had sync problems. If people didn't didn't print their SMPTE right or resolve things right, so I'd have to use Pro Tools to move stuff sometimes, and that was my workflow back then. Then after a while, I kept using the console, but everything pretty much came in Pro Tools and stayed in there. And tape machines haven't run for a few years, and then. I've just, right now I'm just working in the box, and I think, Pro Tools has improved, and, just generally computer recording has improved so much in the last few years, both sonically and in the capability of track count and amount of processing you can run, that I think it's really viable now. And I do that at home because with budgets the way they are, nobody wants to pay for a studio that costs quite a bit to maintain and to air condition and for power and for assistance. That used to work in the 90s, doesn't it anymore?
Right.
So I'm using Pro Tools HDX at home now with UA plugins, UA powered plugins. I have an octo and a quad in there, and some outboard gear. I have massive passive. I have GML EQ and compressors. I have some outboard reverb. I have a Bricasti, which I keep calling a Briaski, from the New York Antacids.
Right.
If anybody's old enough to remember the commercial with Rocky Graziano, you say you got a stomach ache. Well, take Briaski, eat. You're too thin anyways.
Same thing for the reverb, right? Well, fill everything out.
So I can't think of a Bricasti without thinking of Briaski.
Right.
But some outboard gear, and then if I'm working on a higher budget project like Daft Punk was, we use a commercial studio. We did that mostly at Conway, some at Henson, and it's just a real treat now to work in. You work on a beautiful analog console, the Neve 88R there. And,
right.
So,
Now let's talk a little bit about that album. You just completed the Daft Punk album.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how did the process work?
That came about, Daft Punk was involved with a guy, an arranger, composer, Chris Caswell, who worked on the Tron Legacy project with them. And then they were doing this album, they were working on just writing and getting ready to do this album, pre-production, and they were talking to Chris. They said, hey, we need an engineer who's been sort of well-versed in different musical styles from the 70s to now, mainly R&B and stuff like that. And he recommended me because of just the wide variety of stuff I've done. So I met with the guys and ended up recording all the basic tracks, a lot of the overdubs, and mixing the album. And it was a lot of fun because it was a combination of older techniques and modern techniques. It was all recorded in Pro Tools, but through a console, through external preamps. We used everything from Neve 1073s, APIs, the preamps in the Neve 88R. The 88R, we had some remote preamps out in the studio that we used, and had a nice mic selection, and got to experiment a lot. These guys didn't mind spending some time, and we really, on the basic tracks, really printed it how they wanted it to sound, and didn't really have to do an extreme amount of processing later.
Right.
And it was just a great experience working with real live musicians again. Haven't really done that since the 80s.
Right.
And it was a great project. And when it came to mixing, that was sort of old school too, even though, of course, we had Pro Tools to pre-mix some stuff. We had console with automation, but they booked all summer for mixing, and we'd keep each song up until everybody was happy with it. No recalls. We didn't have any recalls on it. And in some cases, I'd mix a song, they'd come in and say, let's tweak this, let's tweak this. In some cases, they'd also go, okay, I hear this mix now. We got so we're going to go in the other room and change edit some parts. And so it was a collaborative effort throughout where they were listening to the mixes, and we'd change mixes, we'd change, do some parts and do some recording, and then just keep it up until it was done and everybody's happy with the song. Then we'd move on to the next song.
Right.
That way it was really old school, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to say more old school than the current approach, which I would bet many of your projects, you receive the tracks, and then you mix them and
do recalls,
Right. When those come in, what's your process when you receive a song to mix? Do you have a process that you go through to set that up and start working?
Depends on the song, because if there's a rough mix there, and I'll always ask the producer artist, is this rough mix an example of close to what you want, or is it just something that you've been working from? And if it's a rough draft of their concept of the song, I'd listen to that first and try to set up similar balances and then go from there. if I don't have a rough that's an example, I'll just work with the tracks and get it to where I like it and submit it like that. Usually set up the rhythm section first, drums, bass, guitar, whatever the main guitar would be or the main keyboard, then lead vocal and backgrounds, then put all the sweetening and other stuff in.
So you kind of build from the foundation
yeah,
up.
foundation up, rhythmic foundation, chordal foundation, vocals, and then go back to all the production stuff.
Right. So when you receive a song to mix like that, are they generally pretty ready to go? Do you have to do a lot of editing? Do you do the tuning on vocals? Do you get into that kind of stuff, or are you just mixing?
I'm just mixing. I mean, I have done tuning before. I prefer not to spend my time doing that. And
right.
I mean, there's guys who specialize in it who are a lot faster at doing that than I am. I can do it, but I'm sort of slow at it. I don't do it that often. Mm-hmm. Of course, I do it if something's missed and I need to fix a few lines. I'll do that, but I'd prefer not to have to take the whole vocal track and work with it like that.
Right.
I mean, edits I'll do for people and stuff. It depends what the job requires. It's.
Mm-hmm. And in most cases, then, working from your home, I assume the artist is not there when you're mixing. Do you send emails then to get approvals, or how do you do that?
Different ways. We could either do live streaming, emails, or I get the mix to where I like it and the artist comes over. That's one of the nice things about being back in LA is because most of my business has always been from there. So
right.
Now I can have a face-to-face communication with somebody, but it's nice getting it ready myself and then starting fresh another day to tweak it rather than we're paying all this for studio time and we got to get it done tonight.
Right. Makes things much better. Right.
And on this project I'm working on right now, this new artist in Capitol, D.A. Wallach, we're doing an interesting thing. We're mixing in the box at my house. He comes over, we tweak it, mixing to stems. Mix it, combine the stems, have bus processing on it, in the box and out of the box too. But then we've been bringing it over to Capitol Studios and running the stems through the Neve 8068 they have, and through analog outboard gear and recording the final mix onto an ATR half-inch 30-amps machine.
Nice.
And just getting the fatness and warmth from the transformers and the Neve and from going to real tape. And I think that's a really nice compromise, being able to do the processing and all the surgical processing with plugins on the tracks, and then the stem and bus processing with classic analog gear. I think is
So you've kind of taken the hybrid approach, which most people would think of as working in the box and then having outboard gear like Manley, like passive and things. But you've taken that to a whole other level by now also taking the project into an analog studio. And
right, because I don't have a Neve 8060 at home. I don't have room for it.
Wouldn't it be nice though?
Yeah, it would. But then I'd be back to the whole thing of needing maintenance, needing a big room, needing special air conditioning.
Right, all that stuff.
And then I don't have an analog tape machine. I mean, I wouldn't mind having one, but then again, there you have a lot of maintenance. You have to align it all the time, and just sort of spoiled by working digitally that you just turn it on and it works. So,
right.
Then let the guys who are really good at it at the analog studio keep that equipment in tip-top shape, and then we'll use it.
Sure. So having worked for so many years out of home studios, many of the people watching this video will have a home studio. Yeah. What advice do you have for them for creating a good environment to work in?
I think more important than the gear is there's the room acoustics, and I know that's a challenge in home studios because you're limited by the amount of space. I would say first thing to do is find a room in your house that has close to the golden ratio, approximately 1 to 1.2 to 1.6 kind of ratio. So any standing waves in the room are split over the third octave rather than having a high, rather than having two on top of each other. And then use bass trap the corners so you minimize the low end problem. Get rid of early reflections with panels on the side, in the front. Really work on the room acoustics because any modern decent monitor or decent piece of gear, the differences between any of that is very small compared to the problems that a room, an untreated or not acoustically correct room will cause. So I think that's really where to start. Get an environment that you can hear in, and then you can audition, get different gear, and decide what.
where to go from
what
there.
would be best for me, yeah.
All right, right. Great advice. Great advice. Mick, thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, thank
we
you.
appreciate you being here, taking your time to talk to the sales engineer this morning.
Oh,
and
you guys got an amazing place here.
Oh, thank you
I
for
thought I was
saying
just
so.
going to go into a music store, and it's like I'm on a campus.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, all kinds of stuff here. Did you get a tour? Did you get to see the whole place?
No, not the whole thing
We'll
yet.
make sure we take you around
Great.
and show you everything. It's a fun
Cool.
place to see.
Cool.
So once again, thanks for coming in. We appreciate Manly Labs bringing you out and you taking the time to show your you were playing stems through the gear. Just great stuff. So
Thanks.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.